Welcome to Speaking of Grace, the weekly message podcast from the Whole Life Church in Orlando, Florida. We're a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-generational congregation committed to our mission of loving people into a lifelong friendship with God. We are committed to our vision of being a church without walls, fully engaged in serving the people of our community. Thank you for joining us as we continue Speaking of Grace.
So we are wrapping up my series on play. It's the first time I've ever done a sermon series on play. I think it's actually the first time I've even done sermons on play, and I have had a good time. I hope you have too. And as we wrap it up, we're going to be talking about travel. And as serendipity would have it, or maybe some planning, we have a large group of people. Some of you in this worship center are like, man, it seems like last Sabbath it was so much more full. It feels a little empty today. Well, that's because we have 145 of our church family that are traveling. They are on their way to Gillette, Wyoming. All right, there's a few of you that know what's going on. So for those of you who don't, let me go ahead and make sure that you're filled in. So at our church, we have what's called a Pathfinder Club. If you're not familiar with Pathfinders, just think about Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, smush them together, you've got Pathfinders. And if you're familiar with Boy Scouts, they have these things called jamborees, right? Where they have big get-togethers of Boy Scouts that'll come together. We have camporees, which are big get-togethers of Pathfinders that get together. And so the largest camporee that happens in the world with Pathfinders is happening this next week up in Gillette, Wyoming. 60,000 people coming together in Gillette. Yes, you've never heard of Gillette, Wyoming? They're about to put it on the map. In fact, here's a fun fact for you. You can use this in your next trivia night. What is the largest event to ever take place in the state of Wyoming? The 2024 Seventh-day Adventist Pathfinder Camporee is the true answer to that. It is actually out. Look it up. Google it. It's there. Largest event to happen ever in the state of Wyoming. I love it. It just makes me so happy to say that. So, now, as long as we're talking about numbers, I want to tell you something really cool. Our Pathfinder Club here at Whole Life, we've had Pathfinder Clubs over the years. There was a little bit of a lull between having it, and about 2.5 years ago, our Pathfinder director, Tomas Diaz, came to me and said, Ken, we need to have a Pathfinder Club. And I said to him what I say to everybody who comes up with a great idea. Good, make it happen. And Tomas, being the amazing guy that he is, said, absolutely, I'll make it happen. Let's do this. And so he has done an incredible job. Like, I kid you not, yeah. And yeah, he has an incredible staff of people. So I just want great group. So we're sending 145 Pathfinders to Gillette. Now let me tell you, just to give you an idea, that makes us the 6th largest club at this event. Yeah, that's what Tomas told me. So if he's wrong, that's Tomas, okay? But it gets even cooler. You remember that we asked you for money to help get the Pathfinders there? You remember that? So here's what's really cool. Here's what I want you to know. For those of you who donated money to this is the good that you didn't just send 145 kids from Whole Life and from this area to Gillette. You did something even more amazing. That's amazing on its own. So Tomas was like, we have enough money that's come in. If we raise just a little bit more, you know what we can do? We can sponsor a club from Tanzania that could never make it on their own. And so our church, you, help take a club from Tanzania, and they're going to be camping with our club using our tents. Yeah. And you know what that means? That makes us actually the 2nd largest camping group at this event. So, true fact, so I said 145 people, they got on an Allegiant flight that has 155 seats. Tomas, can you show us what that looks like? Let's see.
Hey, Pastor Ken. So we're just here boarding the flight right now. It's been a little crazy, but let me just show you everybody. Say hi, everybody. Say hi, say hi, say hi.
Did you spot the 10 people that weren't with them? Okay. They're like, oh, wow, right? Awesome. And so like I said, today I'm talking about travel. We're talking about travel. And we have a Pathfinder Club that's doing that. They're going to go out. They're going to have an amazing time. And we're doing it in the context of play, that I believe travel is a part of play. And I know that there's work travel, right? You sometimes have to fill out that when you're traveling somewhere. Is this work or is this, leisure? What is it? But I think that travel is an incredibly important part of play. It's an important part of our lives. You actually see travel a lot in the Bible. Where's the first place that you see travel happen in the Bible? Somebody said Abraham. That's probably where I would have gone first, but it's you have to think a little bit more dark. Cain. Yeah. Cain is the first traveler because he murders his brother, and God says, yeah, I'm going to make you a wanderer, and so he eventually wanders, finds his own city. So, and this is one of the reasons why it's important to read the whole Bible and not just one story, because reading that story, you might think, oh, travel is a punishment. And for sometimes it can feel like a punishment, right? Sometimes it can't. But travel is a blessing. And so when you start looking through the Bible, Cain's the first one. Abraham, somebody said that. That's excellent. Yes, Abraham. By the way, how many of you are willing, if God calls you up and says, hey, pack everything you've got into a U-Haul, everything, head west, and I'll let you know when you get there. And you don't get there in a year. You don't get there in 2 years. You just driving around. And God says, no, just trust me. I'm going to make you a great nation. Think about that kind of travel. Something incredible, and that's why we talk about Abraham's faith, to leave his home and go and travel to a place that God would show him. It took faith. I think about vacationing, and I think about Elijah. You all know what I'm talking about, right? So Elijah had a pretty rough work week, and he decided to take a vacation afterwards. You guys remember this? Come on now. You remember this. There's a couple of you've been to seminary. You know about this. Come on. Okay, I may be stretching things a little bit here, okay, but just bear with me. So, Elijah has this big confrontation on Mount Carmel with the prophets of Baal. God is victorious. Life is going good. And then the next thing that happens is Queen Jezebel says, you've taken out my prophets. I'm going to kill you. And Elijah says, vacation time. I mean, that's not really exactly what happened, but he heads out. He goes away. He travels out into the desert. He gets as far away as he can. He goes to a mountain and he sits down and does what I generally do on my first day of vacation. He pouts. I'm like, ugh. It takes a little while to unwind, right? When you're out traveling, it takes a little bit. And so he goes out there and says, God, I wish I was dead. Why don't you care about me? Look at me. I've had to run away. And God comes and speaks to him eventually in a still small voice and comforts him. And he gets that rest that he needs on that vacation. Also, other travelers in the Bible, Jonah. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool, right? He was the first undersea traveler, right? Before, he had a ride in a big fish. Others, Jacob, Moses, the Israelites, 40-year camping trip. Yeah. For those of you who like camping, you're like, woohoo. For those of us who don't, like, ooh. Daniel went traveled in ways he didn't want to. Left his home in Jerusalem, went to Babylon, probably died in a foreign country. Went on a trip. So I could go on and on. There's tons of travel that happens in the Bible, but let's jump right to Jesus. Jesus travels, right? Jesus starts traveling at an early age. Think about this. Jesus is actually not born in his parents' hometown. His parents are traveling from Nazareth to Bethlehem, government-ordered move there. And that's where Jesus is born, and it gets even crazier that after Jesus is born, we don't know how much longer, maybe a year, maybe 2 years later, Herod is trying to kill Jesus, and so his parents flee to Egypt. So Jesus spent time in a foreign country as a child during some formative years of his life. We don't know how long he was in Egypt. Some people say it was maybe a year. Some people say maybe he was 8 years old before he moved back. Nobody's for sure. But that's an interesting thing, that Jesus actually spent time growing up in a foreign country, a different place. And so we see that, and Jesus comes back, grows up in Nazareth, but then he does a lot of traveling during his ministry. If you kind of gauge the places that he went during his ministry, it equals out to over 3,000 miles of travel between the different points that he went to in Judea. And so we kind of sometimes have an idea that he kind of just stayed in a small space. But keep in mind that size is determined by how far you can travel. And when you're traveling by foot, it shrinks the amount of space. If you're traveling by airplane, it makes, so Jesus actually traveled quite a bit for somebody on foot. And interestingly, at the very end of his ministry, as just before he returns to heaven, he tells his disciples, I want you to go travel, right? Go you into all the world, spreading the gospel, making disciples. Remember that, Matthew 28? And so Jesus actually tells his disciples to travel. And that reminds me, I think there's a reason. A great preacher by the name of Karl Hafner said a long time ago, he said Adventists, I'm going to use the word Christians though. He said, Christians are like manure. Spread them out, and they're great. Pile them up, and they just stink. And I think Jesus knew that, and that's why he said, go you into all the world. Spread out. Be the salt of the earth. Salt in large amounts is not good, but spread out in food, it makes it tasty. In Christianity, we can probably learn something by just remembering that just when we only stay in our own little castles, if all we ever did was stay right inside the walls of whole life, at some point we're going to start to stink. But when we go out and we share, we are that church without walls that our vision talks about. We're out in the community. We're out and about. We go out throughout the world. Well, then we start fertilizing. We start making the world a better place. So Jesus tells his disciples, go into all the world, and they do. One of the people that followed that piece of advice is the Apostle Paul. Not a disciple of Jesus, but later came to follow Christ and became an apostle. Loyola Press says that Paul traveled over 10,000 miles in his missionary journeys. And think about that, in that time and that place. Just think about what that means. That is a lot of travel. I mean, just in the context, we talked about Jesus traveling over 3,000 miles. That's further than it is from New York to San Francisco. So think about 10,000 miles. That means back and forth several times, right? So Paul traveled extensively. And so when I think about getting travel advice, I always think about going to Paul. Did you know that Paul gave advice about traveling? Again, I'm going to stretch things a little bit. Just bear with me. Okay, here we go. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who followed the Jewish law, I too lived under the law, even though I'm not subject to the law. I did this so that I could bring Christ to those who are under the law. When I was with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from that law so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God, I just obey the law of Christ. When I am with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. I want to take and unpack that for a minute with you. Do you really hear what Paul's saying? Because I think it's really important for us as Christians to do. And we haven't always been particularly good at this, particularly as missionaries, right? Oftentimes, missionaries are more obsessed with taking their culture to other people, the foreign places, than they are taking Christ to other places. And I don't want to be disparaging too much, but I think it's really important to understand the difference. Culture is the way that we do things around here. That's how I define it. And so a lot of times missionaries have tried to take their culture, the way they do things, where they came from, and say, okay, now you need to do that. There is a difference between taking Christ to people and taking your culture to people. And that's what Paul is talking about here. He says, when I'm with people, I go ahead and join in their culture. But I share Christ with them because I think Christ will improve their culture just as Christ improved my culture. Does that make sense? Following along with me? Because there's what I've discovered in my travels around the world. I've lived in New Zealand for a year. I lived on Guam for 6 years, and I've traveled fairly extensively around the world. And I've traveled around the United States quite a bit. And what I've found is that everybody thinks that where they're at, the way they do things, is the right way. And they're not wrong. It's the right way for them. And what I've discovered as I've traveled through various cultures is this, that every time I go to a new culture, I learn something that makes my life better, that makes me a better person, that grows me. I go, wow, they do that better than my people do that. And then there's always times where I say, and you know what? I think we do this better than they're doing that. But I keep that to myself. I keep that to myself because how do you like it when somebody comes and tells you, oh, you're so backwards, don't you know? And so one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is traveling well, because I think that Paul gives us some advice on what it means to travel well as Christians. So the first thing I want to tell you about traveling well is be flexible. And that's one of the things I love about travel and why I think people should travel is because if you can't be flexible, you'll quit traveling. Because travel is all about flexibility. Flights are going to get canceled. Flights will sometimes get diverted. Vehicles will break down. Hotel rooms will get canceled. Verbos will not look exactly like they looked in the picture. Some of you know. Flexibility. The ability to say, you know what, it's not going the way I planned it, but I'm going to go ahead and roll with it. I'm going to figure out how to deal with that. It's so important. And equally important is that good attitude. Because when things don't go your way, have you ever been around somebody that you really looked up to and they're having a bad day and it really was like, oh. Yeah, some of you have been around me and I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I do, I really do. Good attitude really makes a difference, doesn't it? And you can go ahead and when you're traveling, you can be that ugly person that everybody's like, oh, where are they from so I don't travel there? Or you can be that person that when things aren't going the way that you hoped, you still say, but I'm still fortunate and blessed to be doing what I'm doing. If it's work travel, I'm fortunate to have a job that pays me. Even if I don't want to be traveling, because trust me, for those of us who have had to travel for a living, it gets old living out of a suitcase after a while, even though it looks like fun for a little bit. Good attitude matters. What about that open mind? Back to what I was talking about. When you go in, are you going to a place to change them or are you going to a place to learn? To have an open mind. You know, one of the things that I love about Adventist Frontier Missions, if you're not familiar with them, they send Adventist missionaries into some of the most remote parts of the world. And one of the things that I did not know, but I learned, was about 10 years ago, I had one of their executives at one of my churches, and he told us that before they allow their missionaries to ever share Christ, that missionary has to live in the country for 2 years, and they are not allowed to do any sharing. They just need to get to know the country. They need to get to know the people, have an open mind, learn, start being like Paul. When I'm with them, I'm with them. I'm going to be like them. And they have to actually they had to write a full report that they send back to Adventist Frontier Missions about the country they're in after 2 years before Adventist Frontier Missions will let them do any sharing. Because you know what? It's possible to share Christ in ways that are really offensive if you don't understand the culture and that don't actually share Christ. You're sharing something else. And so I love that. Open mind. So when you travel, are you going in with an open mind saying, I want to learn? Or are you going in saying, I want my cheeseburger. I want to go ahead and have everything exactly the way it was at home. Why did I travel again? Open heart. This is the other part that I want to talk about really quickly with you. When you go somewhere different, understand that what makes a place special is the people that are there. I can tell you, out of all my memories of traveling, the things that stick out to me, I've seen incredible places, beautiful places, geography incredible architecture, all kinds of incredible things. But the thing that always sticks out to me whenever I travel is the people in the place. You know, we were in Africa just at the beginning of the summer, and I will never forget, we were in the back of a Jeep driving through this African village. And this little girl comes running out of the village and she starts waving. She shouts, "Thank you so much for coming and visiting us. Please come back." The people, right? The people. Go with an open heart. Want to know the people, to experience their life and know who they are. Open mind, open heart. So let me tell you a couple stories about what happens when you do travel well and what the benefits are. Firstly, the first benefit of traveling well is that you get to really experience adventure. Adventure comes with risk. It's not an adventure if there isn't some sort of risk to it. And one of my favorite trips that I ever did with my family, and I double dare you to do this, triple dare you. We were in Nashville. And one Friday, it was going to be a long weekend. I hadn't said anything to my family. They came home at the end of the school day. My wife's a teacher. My kids come home. And I said, pack a suitcase and get in the car. And they're like, oh, cool, where are we going? I don't know. They're like, how's this going to work? I said, just pack the suitcase. Well, what do we pack? I don't know. Just whatever you want for 3 days, we're going. Well, where are we going? I don't know. Get in the car. So we get in the car. So for those of you who are observant, you're going to look at these. You'll like, I don't think those pictures are from the same trip. Okay, you're right, they're not. But I had to have both pictures to make the point, because we get in the car and the kids are sitting in the back. And that picture is taken about 2 months after the picture of us eating ice cream. We get in the car, the kids are sitting in the back. I give them Uno cards. And I said, okay, whenever it comes time for an exit off the highway, we're going to draw cards. Highest card, we turn in the direction with the child with the highest card. We had to modify the game. We started going in circles. So there were some modifications that took place, but it worked. And we wound up, can I just tell you, we wound up in a place I would never, ever in a million years have chosen to visit on my own. Paducah, Kentucky. What is Paducah known for? There's only one thing. Stephen Curtis Chapman's hometown. That's it. Except that that's not it. It is a super cool town. I would never have known that if I had not traveled there. But when I went there, they have an amazing ice cream place, which is where we're eating there. It's fantastic. But even cooler, they have this really cool river walk. They have murals that people have painted along this river walk. It is really, really cool. Paducah, Kentucky, your next vacation. So we wound up there, and then because we were randomly driving, we drove through a place called Land of the Lakes, which is gorgeous and beautiful, and we hung out there. Terrific time. Travel gives us the opportunity to experience adventure. It means that an adventure is not an adventure unless there's some risk to it, unless there's something to it. And so risk is good for us. We actually need it. I know we like to try to be risk adverse, but risk really matters. Taking risks, reasonable risks. It's a good thing. An adventure is a good thing. Another thing that if you travel well, you'll actually start to be able to understand other people better. You'll broaden your perspectives. For instance, in the picture behind me, the painting behind me, it's a representation of Magellan showing up at Guam. And the Chamorros come out and they come onto his ship and they take everything that isn't nailed down. They take everything that's not nailed down, and Magellan gets angry and he starts shooting at them and he kills some people, and thus begins a very sad part of history. Well, here's the problem. Magellan, some of you agree, like these people are stealing Magellan's stuff, so he has a right to be upset about it, right? Can we also recognize a little irony here? He's about to claim their island for Spain. Stealing? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just saying. Anyway, so just bear with the irony a little bit here, okay? You take a few of your stuff, I'm going to take your whole island. What? Okay. Anyway, so here's the thing, though. If Magellan had taken the time to do what I hope you do when you travel, he would have started to understand something. On Guam, they have a different understanding of property than we do in our Western society. In Western society, if you like my cool T-shirt that the Pathfinders gave me before they left, or my polo here, if I go home and I wash it and I put it and hang it in my closet, and you walk into my house, by the way, how did you walk into my house? You walk into my house and you walk into my closet and you take my shirt and you wear it, you would have stolen my shirt. That's not the way it works on Guam. On Guam, the way the Chamorros worked at the time when Magellan showed up, they don't do, because they've been westernized, so don't go taking things out of people's homes on Guam now, okay? You'll be stealing. But the way it worked before Magellan showed up was this, is that if you needed something, you just go to your neighbor's house and take it if they weren't using it. Not a problem. The neighbor would come get it back when they needed it. More of a community idea of property. Now, I know some of you are thinking that's right or that's wrong. It's not. It's just the way they did it. And if we all have the common understanding that it's okay for me to come take that, then it's not stealing, is it? We all have that understanding. Magellan, so when Magellan shows up on their property, they just do, hey, you don't seem to be using this, we're going to take it. And if you need it, you can come back and get it. But he doesn't understand that because he never took the time to understand the culture. So might I suggest that when you travel well, it will broaden your perspectives if you ask questions and are curious and seek to learn. And you might learn that there is something beautiful about the idea that if you need something I have and I'm not using it, that maybe it's a good thing to actually share. There's something to be learned there. Broadening perspectives. Another big thing that traveling does is it will teach you to problem solve. This is a mission trip that I went on to Thailand. That's a whole nother story, but the point I want to tell you about this trip was I'm in Thailand and I get lost in Bangkok, Thailand about 10 o'clock at night. And as a tall, white, redheaded kid who does not speak any Thai, it was problem-solving time, because this is before, I know some of you don't understand this, this is before you had, one of these things. I'm talking to you, I'm looking right at you, you know I'm talking to you. Don't worry, I only pick on the people who know that, anyway, so it was before the phone, so I couldn't get my phone out and be like, where am I at, route me home. I had to figure it out. And that is one of the amazing things about travel. When you travel, even today, even with a phone, you still have to problem solve. You have to figure things out. You're in a different environment that forces you to think outside of the box that you normally live in. And that's one of the things that's so helpful. And by the way, that's helpful spiritually as well, because it broadens your perspective. When you live in other places, you stop thinking that the only way that things are done is the way that they're done here. And so when you read the Bible, you start going, I wonder if maybe 2,000, 3,000 years ago, in a different culture, a different time, a different place, I wonder if they were just doing things in a different way than we do it now. And maybe I need to think about this more deeply and see if there's more in here than just the way I would maybe apply it in today's context. Another beautiful thing about travel, and this is our group that did the Africa trip, the Whole Life Africa trip at the beginning of this summer, is there are a bunch of people in that picture that I did not know very well at all before I went on this trip. And one of the things I love about traveling, particularly with groups, mission trips or church trips, is that every time I do it, I deepen my relationships, even on family trips. You deepen the relationship with the people you're traveling with, and you make new friends when you're traveling. And that is one of the real big benefits. Like this group of people now, we get together and we hang out. I can't wait we're going to get together and all look at our pictures. That's coming up, right? We're going to do that, right? That's going to happen. I'm supposed to make it happen, so that's on me. But we're going to make that happen. But I love this group of people. They're phenomenal. A bunch of them I didn't know well, and they are so great. And every mission trip, every trip I've ever been on is the same. Now, if you're not traveling well, you can lose friends. You can lose friends when you're not flexible, when you're not willing to take a look at bigger picture. But if you're willing to do it, you will have so many amazing experiences. And it's one of the reasons why we're going to keep offering different travel opportunities here at the church. We're going to try to look at some travel opportunities here in the United States. We're going to try to look at some foreign ones. We're going to look at a lot of different opportunities. But we want to go ahead and give you the opportunity to maybe get to know some people that you didn't know that well and go, that person is so cool. I had no idea that I was sitting 2 rows away from such an amazing person. The final thing that I want to say about travel is that it gives us a greater appreciation for home. I've traveled to some really amazing places. And the one I talked about earlier about New Zealand. New Zealand is arguably the most beautiful place on earth. It is gorgeous. The people are amazing. They're wonderful people. And yet, can I just tell you, I never felt quite at home. As one of my carpenter friends said, you've seen the levels, how there's a little bubble in the level. Just a bubble off plum is what he used to say. And that's how I always felt in New Zealand. It was like there's something that wasn't quite right, just not quite home. And that doesn't mean New Zealand was bad. It just means that my heart belongs somewhere else. I was raised somewhere else. My family was somewhere else. My long-term friends were somewhere else. I had friends in New Zealand now, but home. The people who understand me. The people who understand the inside jokes of where you grew up. I love New Zealand, wonderful place. It never felt quite like home. And whenever I'm traveling and I use that metaphor, I always think about that old song that says, "This world is not my home. I'm just passing through." And every time I travel, I'm reminded that even when I come home, I'm not home yet. That there is a home that has been prepared for me, where the true person who loves me the most, even though I have people that love me incredibly here on earth, the person who loves me the most is prepared for me. And that's where my real home is at. And so travel always reminds me of that when I go home, I'm not really home yet. That there is something even better and greater waiting for me. So family, travel. If you haven't done it, do it. Get out. See this country. See the world as much as you're able to. And I know it costs money to do that, and it's a luxury. But if you can, do it. Get out and do it. It's because it will broaden your perspectives. It will give you adventure. It'll help you see outside the box. It will teach you that your way of doing things is not the only way of doing things. And in doing so, it will teach you about God and grow your spiritual life if you allow it to. You know, traveling is a blessing. And when you travel, you can be blessed and you can be a blessing where you go. Be a blessing.
Hi, this is Randy McGray, podcast producer and host here at Whole Life Church. Loving people into a lifelong friendship with God is our mission at the Whole Life Church, and our podcasts are designed to help facilitate conversations that help us grow together in that pursuit. Now that you've heard the message for this week, don't forget to check out the Whole Life takeaways for this message. Swipe up in today's show notes and join the conversation. Speaking of conversations, each Wednesday morning we take a closer look at the week's message. That's right, the one you just listened to. We discuss practical ways to apply spiritual lessons and ask honest questions about the issues we face as Christians, all focused through the lens of grace. Your voice is a welcomed addition to that conversation. We encourage your thoughts and your questions by sending a voicemail or text to 407-965-1607 or send an email to podcast@wholelife.church. You can find everything podcast related on our website, wholelife.church/podcast. And plan on spending every Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning with us as we bring you the Whole Life Church inspiration you love straight into your headphones. Thanks for listening and have a great week.